I guess the goal for my portion of this is to make you more aware of the position of a spouse of a minister. And I want you to know right up front that I absolutely love ministry. I love God's church. And I believe that there is nothing more rewarding than serving in ministry in this capacity. I love praying with people, leading. I have the opportunity when I was working in children's ministry to lead children to Christ. Oh, nothing more rewarding. I love working with young adult women in evangelism. I love watching people worship as I'm leading worship. I'm motivated. So I need you to know up front that I love ministry and I love being a pastor's wife. I have actually been in ministry for 57 years. I was born into it. My dad was an evangelist when I was born. He then became a pastor. We became missionaries to Port-au-Prince, Haiti. And then now, of course, I'm a pastor's wife. So it's really all I know, and I'm truly humbled. I'm very humbled that the Lord would allow me to serve him in this capacity, in this various aspect of ministry. I feel honored. I really do. However, in these 57 years of ministry, being born into it and then married into it, I don't really consider myself called by God to be a minister. I know I'm supposed to minister because I'm a Christian and I want to, but I'm not called by God to be a pastor's wife. And I do believe, as Steve said, that other than parenting, I believe that ministry is the most important job in the world because, of course, we are guiding people to their eternal destination. And it is necessary, because of that, it is necessary to be prepared along the way. With such a great and awesome responsibility comes the great inherent dangers that Steve talked about, and we're not immune to the devil's tactics at all. There's a saying that if the devil can't make you bad, he'll make you busy. And in our ministry busyness, we can, if we're not cautious, create an undercurrent of misery for ourselves, for our marriages, and for our children. And Steve said, of course, I'm going to speak here on behalf of the pastor's wife, since that's what I do. The pastor's wife, our spouse, wears many hats. She's a mother of your children, and she wants to love and nurture and teach and provide safety. She's a homemaker, creating and trying to provide a retreat and a safe haven for you and your family and your children. Often she must help with family finances. That means sometimes she has to get a job outside the home in order to make the finances work for the family. And then, on top of all of that, there are the expectations of her because of your calling. The pastor's wife. Because of your calling, she is scrutinized, she is evaluated, she is judged every time she walks out of her house. And most people in your congregation have a preconceived idea of what her role looks like and what she is supposed to be like. Whether you like it or not, they have a preconceived idea and expectations. When they see her in the grocery store, when they see her at children's school functions, when they see her at the gas station, when they see her at the shopping mall, when someone from your church sees her, they have expectations of how she is to respond to them, even dress. And often she identifies with this particular job description. I'm going to read this job description to you, and you can imagine that this is what the pastor's wife often thinks of her job description. Must always appear happy, must always be empathetic, must be able to handle being in the public eye, even in private situations 24/7, must be able to settle conflicts with diplomacy, must always be patient, be ready to apologize even if it is not her fault, able to bite her tongue even when the other person is wrong, have the temperament to satisfy all, willing to pay and keep paying her dues, willing to win the people's approval again and again and again, a good team builder and player, Thick skin, tough enough to handle when someone is negative regarding her spouse, you, or her kids. She can handle not being liked, able to find joy in toxic environments. She must work hard at not complaining. And last but definitely not least, willing to stay the course and finish the race. Your wife, the pastor's wife, probably does identify with this particular job description, but this is actually the description of a politician's wife. When I went online and researched, this is what the job description said for the politician's wife, but it also added this: long, hard hours, very low or no pay at all, lots of heavy emotional lifting, no beginning time, no end time, and must always be available and flexible. She can identify with that as well. All of this applies to a politician's wife, but it also applies to a pastor's wife, except for one thing. The politician's wife does not carry the burden of eternity on her shoulders. The pastor's wife role is is unique, and it's full of dangers. You, the pastor, her husband, you'd be a fool to pretend that it is not dangerous. And worse, you would be even more foolish to ignore best practices that are designed to equip your family and you for a healthy ministry. In all of my 57 years of ministry, there have never been any classes or any seminars to prepare me for serving as a pastor's wife. Nothing to prepare me for the inherent dangers. It would be prudent to prepare for this awesome position to serve our God. Prepare, be tenacious about maintaining healthy practices in order to avoid the dangers. Now, your wife, the pastor's wife, has the following concerns on a daily basis, just to give you some insight. Her concerns are keeping the marriage fresh and healthy, providing a safe, loving home environment, and when needed, helping to provide financially, and then nurturing and keeping the children healthy and safe. Her concerns, that's her home concerns. Her concerns for your job are not offending so that the parishioners do not leave the church, because this would affect the finances, thus affecting the family. She's concerned someone will complain about you to her or her kids, and then she labors over how to respond in a way that will not offend them, but yet she desperately wants to defend the ones that she loves. She's concerned about church attendance, of course. If it's down, should she jump in and start another program to help bolster attendance? What about the tithe and offering? Was it good? She's concerned about keeping the church up to date and relevant for growth. Should she redecorate? Should she allow the young people to bring their coffee into the sanctuary? Would that attract more young people? She will have a congregant approach her with questions like this. You can count on it. Why does the pastor, her husband, you, allow the praise team to dress that way? Why doesn't the Holy Spirit move according to their preferences and their style? Why does the pastor, her husband, you, allow certain people to serve in the church because they really don't measure up spiritually, in their opinion? She's concerned, will somebody complain to her about your sermons? Are they too long? Are they too short? Or is there not enough scripture? She's concerned that the older generation will stop coming because the sound is too loud or too soft. They couldn't hear it. What if young people think that the worship songs are too old, not contemporary enough? They're going to go somewhere else. The older generation may think that the songs are too new and they can't sing along. They don't know any of the words. On any given Sunday, a pastor's wife will be asked to fill the bathrooms with toilet paper or soap, make more coffee, make copies for a class. She'll be asked to give her husband a verbal message after church or be handed an item to give to him on top of everything else that she has going on that day. And then if she forgets, it's very offensive. The pastor's wife is concerned that she herself is relevant in her own appearance. Will the congregation be proud to call her their pastor's wife? And if she isn't concerned about how she looks, what does that say about her? will someone complain that her children Will someone complain that her children are not setting a good example for the other kids in the church? There's so many more. But the pastor's wife role is unique, and here are some examples of uniqueness. The pastor's wife plays a significant role in your job performance. If a pastor's wife does not perform well in worship, in fellowship, discipleship, socialization, or ministry in general, her husband could be called into question. Try to think of a job where this is the case, other than a politician. What electrician, accountant, programmer, policeman's wife can influence the performance of their husbands in a review? To know that you have to worship where your husband works and that your performance in the church environment can make or break your husband's career often stresses ministry marriages. Number 2, the pastor's wife is generally expected to fill in the gaps in ministry. And we usually love doing that. But imagine accountant's wife. What if the accountant's boss called him and said, hey, the office manager didn't show up today, your wife's going to have to come in and fill in that spot. It sounds crazy, but it happens every Sunday. The pastor's wife can be called to teach in children's ministry. When a volunteer doesn't show up, she may greet at the front door because the greeters didn't show up. She may even usher. She will sing on the praise team more than likely. She'll make coffee, all for the same reasons. And there is a pervasive expectation throughout churches where the pastor and his wife are hired as a package deal. 2 for the price of 1. And only a politician can relate, perhaps. Number 3, how often does a man's job require his children to measure up to a certain standard? My son, age 3, just out of toddler stage, put his little foot on top of a lady's Bible in the bathroom, and after coming out of the stall, she looked at me and said, I couldn't believe that the pastor's son would do such a thing. I just simply said, I couldn't believe that you would put your precious word of God on the bathroom floor. My son, when he was 5 years old, was taken outside of the Sunday school class. At 5 years old, taken outside the Sunday school class and reminded that he was the pastor's son and he should be setting a better example for the other boys. What kind of pressure to put on a 5-year-old child to be an example for all the other kids in church. My middle daughter, age 12, in the balcony of church was getting a little too enthusiastic in worship. A lady behind her told her she knew her daddy and she knew that he was the pastor and that she'd better stop her booty dancing and set a better example. My oldest daughter, in her teenage years, made choices, as teens do sometimes, that are unacceptable, causing another member to question the ability of my husband, the pastor, because he couldn't keep his own household in order. How often does a man's job in a secular world require the children to measure up to a certain standard? Number 4, the pastor's wife is interviewed along with her husband for advancement in ministry. Some of you may remember this story. What other career can you imagine this happening? If a mechanic wants to get an advancement in certification, does his wife come in to be interviewed for that? When my husband was being interviewed for the next level of ministry, I was required to appear before the credentialing committee. And after a bit of small talk, a regional council member says to me, are you prepared to meet the sexual needs of your husband? Because if you're not, there are plenty of women out there who will. To which I gathered my composure and said to him, well, I guess I'd better step it up a notch. What other career scrutinizes a spouse to this degree? Now, you and your wife need to put practices in order to combat these dangers that are inherent in pastoring. You have an awesome responsibility as you work for the Lord in this capacity. If you want to maintain a strong, healthy marriage, if you want to raise children who love the Lord and love the church, if you want to thwart bitterness, if you want to float above conflict and not drown, if you want to avoid exhaustion, if you just want satisfaction in serving the Lord, it is important, first of all, that you acknowledge that there are inherent dangers. and then put practices in place to combat those dangers. I need you to know that it is okay for the pastor's wife to set clear boundaries between her home and the church family. She has a responsibility to hold you responsible for that as well, to set good boundaries, to preserve the health and well-being of your families. Your marriage must take precedence over your church. Your children must take precedence over your church. Because when a church member has ripped you to shreds over something trivial, or your staff is not being cooperative, or the church finances are weighing you down and attendance might be down, the stress from a well-intentioned dragon member is wreaking havoc. When all this is going on, your wife, the pastor's wife, and hopefully your children will still be there. Isn't she more important and worth more the attention than anyone else? Aren't your children more important? Besides, and this is heavy, but you are the chief evangelist and discipler of your children. Your children's events, ball games, school functions come before church events. This says to your child that they are more important than anyone else. It also sets a good example for your church members to put their children first. I love what my friend and fellow pastor's wife, Udella Walker, said to me about raising her children. She said, I knew that I was raising the next generation of Christians and possibly even church leaders. You are the chief evangelist and discipler of your children and maybe your grandchildren. Prioritizing uninterrupted family time is a key component to a healthy family. One example would be the family meal, which is a ritual that's gone by the wayside. My daughter Olivia was shocked to find out that her friends' families didn't sit down for a meal together. When I was a child, we didn't have cell phones, of course. We just had house phones. My mother would set the table. We would sit down. She'd go to the back room, to the master bedroom, take the phone off the hook so that nobody could call in while we were having our family meal. And right there, that said to me as a child, she wants this time with me and my dad. Your wife, the pastor's wife, has the right to be clear about her priorities. God, family, the church. Amen. Your wife, the pastor's wife, may feel alone in what she's going through and how she's feeling and the dangers that she's dealing with in church. She may feel alone, but she's not alone. And after interviewing many pastors' wives, I found there to be many commonalities regarding the stresses and concerns of burnout and dissatisfaction in service. And so it wasn't until I created my own small group, which is what we're talking about today, of pastors' wives who I had history with, who I knew loved me, and wouldn't think that I was a hateful, rank heathen. We went on retreat. I knew that they loved me and they wouldn't think these things about me. We went on retreat together and found that we had this common bond, a sisterhood, where we would pray together and we would lift each other's burdens up. We would talk about the concerns of our churches and our families. We get together every 6 months and we leave there refreshed, ready to come back, ready to serve in ministry. And we all love our jobs. We love that God is using us in this capacity. But we need that time together, sisters together, to bond and pray with each other and also to share things and realize we're not crazy. This is real. If you don't take precaution for your health and your well-being of your family, the dangers of the ministry will erode the satisfaction of serving and for life in general. So I think we realize that the risks are great and the cost is too high, that we need to put practices in place to help us have a healthy ministry and healthy family.